Good afternoon, everyone. I thank you sincerely for your patience. We've overcome some pretty significant IT difficulties today. For the benefit of the recording and the live streaming, I hope you can bear with me because I will have to start the meeting again. Luckily, we only got a couple of minutes in, so thank you again for your patience. I'd like to welcome you all to the West Australian Planning Commission Significant Development Meeting for Part 17 Development Application for those present and now for those online. The meeting is being now live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing via the Commission's website and YouTube. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay our respects to elders past and present. I would like to acknowledge Mayor Daniel Kingston and the councillors of the City of Joondalup, and I'd like to welcome residents of the City of Vincent, the applicant and consultant team, interested parties and deputies to this meeting today. In terms of housekeeping, if you do require the toilets, please go through the foyer and to your right, and in the event of emergency, the City staff will direct us. In opening today's meeting, I wish to make a brief statement. This afternoon's meeting of the Commission is to determine a significant development under Part 17 of the Planning and Development Act. Part 17 does bestow upon the Commission significant discretion. However, under the Act, the Commission must have regard for the purpose and intent of the local planning strategy, scheme and local planning policies, the need to ensure orderly and proper planning and the preservation of amenity of a locality, the need to facilitate development in response to the economic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and any relevant regional planning schemes, state planning policies, and any other relevant WAPC policies. As with any other development application, the Commission has the option to approve the application without conditions, approve the application subject to conditions, approve the application in part, defer the application where the Commission finds they do not have sufficient information, or to refuse the application. This is a considerable responsibility which the WA Planning Commission takes very seriously. I wish to advise observers that Commission members may refer to technical devices such as phones and laptops throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them and in taking notes as part of their deliberations. In conducting the meeting, the Planning Commission understands that there is a high level of public interest in this item, and as a result, the following steps have been taken. We have made arrangements to come to a local venue within the City of Joondalup to provide ease of access to deputies and additional public gallery space. We have 140 members of the public here today, and all members that wish to register have been accommodated. And our meetings are live streamed to ensure that the meeting has as broad an audience as possible. Given that we are not in our usual meeting rooms, this does mean that from time to time we experience technical difficulties in establishing using our own networks within an existing facility. So I do appreciate again that has taken some time to get the meeting started, but it was due to an endeavour to bring this meeting out to the community. May I just also add that throughout the meeting, you may hear things that you agree with very strongly or that you disagree with. Please note that we do ask that you are respectful throughout the meeting and allow all deputies to be heard. You have been invited here today as observers. All people who wish to speak at the meeting have been accommodated through deputations today. So please be respectful of the meeting procedures. And photos of the meeting, as mentioned earlier, are not permitted under WAPC regulations. That's for both photos and film. So thank you very much, everyone. In terms of apologies and leave of absence, we have myself, Commissioner Cole, as the chairperson here today, along with Commissioner Adair, Commissioner Bennett, Commissioner Brooks, Commissioner Hall, Commissioner Lakey and Commissioner Sandry. We have apologies today from Commissioner Herron and Commissioner Shears. Disclosures of interest in relation to this item. We have a disclosure of interest from Commissioner Herron, who has declared an indirect pecuniary interest. Commissioner Herron advised that he was a former employee of Urbis and he was employed by Urbis at the time of the lodgement of this development application, and Urbis is party to the application, having provided the economic benefit study. As a result, Commissioner Herron is not participating in this meeting. Commissioner Shears has also declared an actual impartiality interest in that Commissioner Shears advised that her employer, the City of Stirling, provided a referral response on this item, and as a result, Commissioner Shears is not participating in this meeting. Commissioners, are there any further declarations of interest? Thank you very much. In relation to declarations of representation, I have two. The first is from myself, in that I have met with the proponent on this item on the 15th of April 2025 in the normal course of my duties as chairperson of the WAPC. I've not been provided with any additional information that is not available to other members of the Commission. Subsequent meeting requests were received to discuss the application and referred to the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage to liaise with the applicant directly. Commissioner Lakey has also declared a disclosure of representation in that Commissioner Lakey advised that he was contacted by the proponent regarding the possibility of presenting the proposal to the WAPC. The matter was referred to myself and the Commissioner Lakey did not engage in discussions. No additional information was provided regarding the item that has not been made available to other members of the Commission. Members, are there any other disclosures of representation? Thank you very much. And can all members please indicate that they have received and considered the agenda ahead of today's meeting? Thank you, members. Just also noting that at 1.5.1, additional information has been provided to members in response to questions. I will now hand over to Sam for deputations. Thank you very much, Sam Boucher.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to everyone that's present in order to make a deputation to the Western Australian Planning Commission, either in person or via Zoom. You'll be invited to join the table opposite the Commission this morning or promoted to a panellist via Zoom to deliver your deputation. You have been advised of your allocated time, which will be managed by a timer which will appear on the screen and count down that time. If you do have a PowerPoint presentation this afternoon, this will be displayed on the screen throughout your deputation and you're requested to advise as you wish to advance the slides. So moving to the first deputation on the item for consideration this afternoon, which is the Part 17 development application for the mixed-use development at Warwick Quarter, we're welcoming Suzanne Thompson.
Members of the audience, I understand that you would like to clap, but if you do wish to clap for Suzanne, please hold your applause to the end and please do not clap during the presentation.
Suzanne, your presentation is now on the screen, so over to you when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. Just checking my mic's working and everyone can hear me. Impossible to save an entire suburb in 3 minutes, but still we try. The community is deeply concerned that a part approval of buildings A and B will lock in a terrible outcome for Warwick. Approving just 30% of this proposal does not fix the core problems. 30% of a bad proposal is still a bad proposal. Next, please. A partial approval should not be supported. It is not orderly and proper planning, and it risks fragmenting the precinct before a structure plan is put in place. Next, please. Under the planning and development regulations, the WAPC can only approve if 2 conditions are met. First, that the proposal does not conflict with orderly and proper planning, and second, that it does not prejudice the overall development potential of the area. If either of these tests are failed, the application should not proceed. Next, please. Approving Part A and B fails both tests, and therefore it cannot be legitimately supported. Next. Part 17 was created to fast-track shovel-ready projects during COVID. This application has now been in the pathway for over 700 days. A partial approval would extend delays, and regardless, the pathway is no longer a legitimate planning argument. Next, please. The High Court makes the legal position very clear. Piecemeal development is not a valid planning practice. Pioneer Concrete versus Brisbane City Council said that the piecemeal approval results in decisions being made without proper consideration and place authorities in a dilemma. That precedent has been followed in WA for both Cottesloe and Point Grey. Both show clearly that the lawful decision today must be a refusal. Next. As with those cases, any partial approval would prejudice the entire area's long-term potential. Warwick is a designated secondary activity centre, so we cannot afford to make planning mistakes that can't be undone. Next, please. I haven't time to go through the fundamental planning deficiencies, but suffice to say that these problems will not be solved by approving 2 buildings early. They will be locked in. Next, please. 3 minutes is nowhere near enough time to outline the technical issues, but they are manifest and must be resolved at a precinct scale, not left to hope. Next. Had I time to go on at length with the other concerns that prejudice Warwick's potential, I could outline them all day, but it should suffice to say that the State Design Review Panel has recommended a full redesign, and rightly so. The current plan does not even meet the state planning policies of built environment or precinct planning. It is too risky to approve 2 pieces. Our recommendation, as over 1,400 community submissions and 1,000 signatures indicates, Warwick deserves and expects thoughtful and orderly planning. If part approval is given today, the community will be calling upon Parliament to intervene to protect the future of the Warwick precinct. Next, please. So the community's expectations are clear. Next, please. Outright refusal of the application, require a precinct structure plan, a holistic coordinated approach, strategic long-term vision for Warwick, and that's how we get good planning outcomes. Next, please. As a wise woman once said, density must be done well, not for the sake of it. Thank you.
Suzanne, thank you very much for your deputation today. I will now see whether members have any questions for you. No? Right, thank you. That was a very clear presentation.
The next deputation is from the City of Joondalup, and we're welcoming Catherine Temple, Chris Lee and Mayor Daniel Kingston. Please begin when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just checking that we have 6 minutes. Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair and members of the panel. The City strongly supports the officer recommendation and agrees with the observation that the underlying centre zoning ordinarily requires a precinct structure plan and that certain development should not occur in the absence of one. There are several valid reasons why a structure plan has not yet been prepared for Warwick, and we're happy to elaborate on those reasons should the Commission wish us to do so. In the absence of a structure plan, the planning regulations do provide clear guidance on how development proposals should be assessed. In addition to these, Council has gone beyond these requirements by establishing a position in 2019 that offers even stronger guidance and a transparent framework for decision making. The City has followed the requirements set out under the planning regulations and Council's established position in its assessment of the application. As outlined in Council's resolution, the City has raised concerns regarding the integration of the development within the broader Warwick Activity Centre and surrounding residential area, the impact of the development on the streetscape, amenity and character, in addition to the lack of detail provided with respect to landscaping, traffic and urban water management. In our view, this proposal does not meet the principles of orderly and proper planning, and if approved, it would prejudice future development within the precinct. These are the 2 core requirements set out in the planning regulations that a development must meet in the absence of a precinct structure plan. In addition, the proposal does not comply with the city's local planning framework established by council, which requires proposals to satisfy the commercial zone provisions under its local planning scheme and the commercial zone local planning policy. We understand that the applicant is now seeking approval for buildings A and B only. However, the reasons for not supporting the overall proposal remain highly relevant. These two buildings are the most street present due to their proximity to the street and established residential development, and they would significantly impact nearby residents and the surrounding streetscape. They consider the parcels of land on which they are located, not the broader precinct. For this reason, the city does not support the alternative proposal. Thank you, and I will now hand over to the Mayor.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you to the Chair for permitting this deputation. The proposal before you is out of context with the surrounding suburb and would lead to significant impacts upon community life, from traffic congestion to pressure upon local services. Its fragmented design would set an unwelcome precedent and compromise the ability to deliver a coherent, integrated precinct in the future. Introducing more than 1,000 apartments into a suburb of only just 1,600 dwellings represents a major and an abrupt change. This is not about saying no to development. Joondalup is pro-growth and welcomes investment. We understand the importance of housing supply and the role of infill development in meeting Perth's future needs. But growth must be well done. It must strengthen the suburb rather than compromise it. The Warwick Quarter proposal in its current form does not achieve that. It prioritises what is best for a single parcel of land, not what is best for the precinct, or most importantly, for the community. It lacks integration, does not deliver high-quality public realm outcomes, and raises unresolved issues around transport, amenity, and environmental management. These are not minor details. They go to the heart of the requirements of proper and orderly planning. The city is committed to working collaboratively with the state and with the applicant on a pathway that delivers housing and investment while respecting planning principles and putting the community first. We want Warwick to grow in a way that creates a vibrant, connected precinct with high-quality design, strong amenity, and infrastructure that supports the people who live there. Approving this proposal would set a precedent, and that precedent undermines those objectives. It would lock in a fragmented outcome and make it both harder to achieve the integrated vision that both the city and the state share. Joondalup is ready to work to get this right. We welcome development, but it must be development that enhances Warwick, not overwhelms it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine and Mayor Lee. Sorry, my apologies. Mayor Kingston, sorry, Mayor, new Mayor. I will get that right next time. Really appreciate your deputation today. And I would like to start with the first question, if I might. Catherine, you did refer to providing a bit more information about the reasons why structure planning hasn't been advanced, and the applicant has provided some material to commissioners which does outline attempts to commence structure planning previously with the city. Mayor Kingston, you've referred to being committed to working with the applicant. This is a secondary centre. Could you please outline to the Commission why there hasn't been a structure plan, a precinct structure plan advanced by the City of Joondalup?
Thank you for the question. So the city recognises the importance of the Warwick Activity Centre and understands the interest in a precinct structure plan. There is a long history behind this issue, so please bear with me as I try and sort of take you through what's happened over the years. So back in 2010, the city received a request to lodge a structure plan. At that time, the city advised that it was proposing to prepare a commercial strategy, and that preparation of a structure plan in the absence of that commercial strategy was considered premature. That commercial strategy was prepared in 2013. However, the draft structure plan was not further progressed. In 2014, Council established a position that only minor and incidental development in Warwick could take place prior to the adoption of a structure plan. And we just being mindful that at that time, local government had greater control over insisting that a structure plan be prepared before development. In 2015, the level of control held by local governments over structure planning diminished with the gazettal of the Planning and Development Regulations. Despite the fact that there was no structure plan in place, there was still sufficient planning controls to guide development in Warwick. The land was zoned commercial under our former district planning scheme, and so there was some very clear land use permissibility and development standards in the absence of a structure plan. In October 2018, the city's new local planning scheme number 3 was gazetted and the land in Warwick was rezoned to centre. So that then introduced the requirement for a structure plan. However, there was some limited guidance in place in the absence of one. Recognising that, in early 2019, Council established a revised position that minor development within the Warwick Activity Centre would be considered against the requirements of the commercial zone under the scheme and against its commercial zone local planning policy. So that established that there was a very clear planning framework in place to assess development against. Similar to since the introduction of the Planning and Development Regulations in 2015, the city's resources have been focused on a significant strategic planning agenda, including the preparation of our new local planning scheme and local planning strategy, preparation of an activity centre plan for the Joondalup Activity Centre. The city established and implemented its housing opportunity areas, and we've undertaken several significant reviews of those areas in that time. We've also been undertaking ongoing reviews of our structure plans and going through a normalisation process, and that was responding to some ministerial priorities when our scheme was gazetted. We were advised that we needed to do that work. Following a council decision in 2021, the city is now reviewing its local planning strategy, again with a specific focus on infill housing. The city's also highlighted the importance of Warwick and the opportunity it presents to showcase new state planning policy and submissions in response to planning reform initiatives. So I guess the crux of it is over a number of years, the city has been proactively developing its strategic planning framework to support development and growth across the whole of the city. And it's important to note that the planning regulations and state planning policy 4.2 do not require a precinct structure plan to be prepared to facilitate a development of this nature.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Members, members of the audience, it's not necessary to applaud after every comment. Thank you, though. I'll go to Commission members for any further questions. Thank you, Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you for the explanation on the precinct structure plan, Catherine. So are you able to just specifically outline the most recent correspondence that the city's had separate to this development application from the proponent around the preparation of a precinct structure plan for the site?
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. Look, my understanding is that there was a conversation with the proponent a number of years ago about preparing a development application on this site, and the city's advice at that point in time was that a precinct structure plan would be the preferred way forward. However, in the absence of that any development proposal would need to demonstrate those principles of orderly and proper planning and not prejudicing the development potential of the area.
Thank you. May I ask a follow-up question? So you referenced the city's housing strategy and the work's being done on the strategic planning framework, and aware of the city's housing opportunity areas. Are you able to speak to how this proposal relates to the delivery of the infill housing targets within the city of Joondalup?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So this particular site sits within the housing opportunity area number 1 that runs from Duncraig up to Warwick. And in terms of the facilitation of density targets in that area, that's something that's under review currently with the current local planning strategy. The city's planning framework, or the planning framework that council established with its 2019 decision, was that development in this area would be at an R80 density. And so that would facilitate, I think, development of approximately around about 4 stories. I'm sorry, I can't comment on the number of dwellings that would deliver, but yes, it's at R80.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sandry.
Thank you, through the chair, and thank you, Catherine and Mayor, for your deputations. Just with respect to the precinct structure planning, you've obviously gone through a bit of a process. You've identified that one's not required. You're going through a local planning strategy review. Is it likely that that local planning strategy review will identify this area as requiring a precinct structure plan? And does the city have any oversight in terms of when that may occur?
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. So late last year, I think it was in November or December last year, there was a decision from council in relation to structure planning more broadly across the city, and there's been a investigation requested into the need for the preparation of structure plans over a number of centres in the city, including Warwick. We're currently in the process of finalising that investigation, and we expect to be presenting a report to council on that in the first half of 2026.
Sorry, one more. Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. I appreciate that. And through the chair, with the benefit of the mayor here, is the anticipation from a council perspective that Warwick will be considered for precinct structure planning into the future?
Yes, at this stage, as Ms. Templeman has indicated earlier, is that there is the current ongoing investigation into the structure planning of our centres. And so a particular focus will be on our secondary centres, and for Joondalup, that's Warwick. So it's something that the council is looking at quite carefully. And of course, I imagine the commission would also have, would understand the decision which was made back in October 2024 in response to the Warwick Quarter development. When the submission was made, there was part of that decision was that the council would request the support of the Planning Commission going forward in structure planning the precinct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Adair.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be clear, for the applicant, during this process, there's been a lot going on in the period. You started in 2013 and so on. So thank you for the outline. Has the owner of the property and therefore the applicant been kept informed throughout this process, and especially like late last year, about where council was sitting with the approach to precinct planning?
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. All of the agendas in the minutes in respect to items that go to council are publicly available. In respect to this application and keeping this applicant informed, as the application isn't directly with the city, it's been made through the Department of Planning. The city hasn't kept the applicant up to date in terms of progress on other matters outside of this development application process.
Go ahead, Commissioner Lakey.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Not to labour the precinct structure plan, but I just want to get absolutely clear. So the proponent lodged one, I understand, in 2010, and at that time, City of Joondalup advised it wouldn't advertise it, and we're 15 years later, and you're now suggesting that there is a need for a precinct structure plan. But the language from Mayor then, you said we will consider a precinct structure plan. I just want to get clarity on the next steps for the proponent.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, yes, there was a request for a structure plan lodged back in 2010, and there's obviously been a lot of things that have taken place since that time. In terms of providing some clarity for the proponent and for the community more broadly, the city is currently undertaking an investigation more broadly about structure planning across a number of activity centres, Warwick being one of those. And we anticipate that a report will go to council in the first half of next year, and that will set out the priorities as we would recommend those, and for the opportunity for council to then consider how it would like to prioritise those centres. It is worth adding that the Joondalup Activity Centre is also due to expire in October 2028. And so there's a need for the city to also start to look at that in terms of commencing that review. That's something that we do have some direction from council for as well. And so there will be a need for council to, I guess, make a decision on the priority and timing for those sorts of things. And sorry, may I just add that we are very open and welcome to engaging with the state and the landowners in a precinct in terms of looking to prepare a precinct structure plan.
So for clarity, you'll come to that decision in middle of next year, and you might or might not require a precinct structure plan on this site.
Thank you. Look, I can't preempt any decision of council. I think there's certainly a commitment there from council that they are wanting to consider the need for structure plans over a number of activity centres. There's obviously been a lot of discussion around the Warwick Activity Centre, and that's something that is front of mind for council.
Can I just ask a follow-up question to that? In terms of your prioritisation of where to go to first with your PSP planning, will you be taking into consideration land where there is landowners that are actively seeking to develop their land as a consideration in your prioritisation? The reason I ask this question is that we are dealing with this particular precinct where we have an active development application and a willingness by the applicant to undertake development. Will that be part of the prioritisation consideration?
Thank you for the question. Look, yes, I would expect so. I think the city is very open and willing to wanting to set a very clear strategic planning framework in place, noting that there is already an established council position that would guide development in this precinct until a precinct structure plan has been prepared.
Thank you, Commissioner Bennett, and then Commissioner Adair.
Thank you. So also to follow on from this, so if the applicant now is to come together with other landowners within that precinct and prepare separate to the city, but to prepare a comprehensive precinct structure plan, would the city be of the view to accept that structure plan and progress with it as proposed by the proponent?
Thank you for the question, and through the chair, yes, the city would be very, very willing to work with the proponent in the first instance, as we would with anybody if they were looking to prepare a precinct structure plan. We obviously have regulatory and legislative obligations that exist under the planning and development regulations, and so if a precinct structure plan was submitted by a proponent, then we would follow the procedures and process in accordance with those.
Thank you, Chair. Catherine, you're being grilled, sorry, but for clarity again, because language is important, you've said a number of times that the report will go to council. I understand you can't preempt anything from that and it's not complete at this stage, but you've said we'll examine the need for structure planning. Do I understand correctly that you mean the benefits of structure planning?
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, that's correct. Certainly looking at the benefits of structure planning, and the city has a number of centres of a varying hierarchy, and so certainly looking at where the greater need is for structure planning as part of that.
Commissioner Hall.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your deputation today. So over a long period of time, there's been a lack of progress on the structure planning for this site by the city. Do you think that's contributed to the applicant having chosen this pathway to lodge their development application?
Thank you, through the chair. No, I don't believe that that's what's led to this particular application being submitted. The Part 17 pathway was set up by the state government to facilitate development to assist in the economic recovery from COVID-19. The city has had experience in other centres where there's been structure plans in place and applicants have chosen to go down the Part 17 pathway, and development has been approved at a greater scale than what was envisaged in relatively contemporary planning frameworks. So no, I don't believe that the absence of a precinct structure plan is what's led to this.
I have a question from Commissioner Brooks first, and then I'll come to you, Commissioner Sandry.
Hi, just something a little bit different. In relation to the broader precinct area surrounding the buildings that are proposed, there's some landscape planning obviously within the lots that they've provided, but there is very little consideration of the area around it. Reading through some of the materials, I understand that there was an approach to the city to look at the potential for landscaping within the existing drainage basin. And it's not clear to me whether that was declined by the city or whether it just kind of fell by the wayside. But I'm just interested to understand what kind of engagement around broader landscaping, broader creation of amenity, and achieving some of that community benefit that people would like to see, how much engagement there has been with the city and other landowners.
Thank you, and through the chair. So in terms of engagement with the city, when the application was first submitted, it was not submitted with an urban water management plan, and that detail came through at a later stage. It's my understanding that there was some verbal conversations in terms of what may be able to be achieved, but obviously there was no further detail or information that was provided in respect to that drainage basin. In the comments that the city provided back on the urban water management plan, we did highlight that there is some potential to investigate whether the sump could actually be relocated and repurposed to support a better development outcome in the precinct, and that could include something along the lines of better landscaping and built form outcomes.
Commissioner Sandry.
Thank you. Just to follow on and regarding the precinct structure planning, and the reason why I'm asking the question again is simply because it is a fundamental part of the assessment of this application. To the Mayor, do you believe that there is appetite on your council and as the leader of your council that precinct structure planning will be an approach that will be undertaken, and because there is an active developer in this area, that Warwick may be one of those first ones to be considered?
Yes, so going back to the previous decision to investigate our centres and which ones were appropriate for structure planning, to set a prioritisation for that, I was one of the councillors, previously being a councillor and now the Mayor, I was one of the councillors who did put forward some of those proposals to say that this is now a priority given that these sites have active development within them. And of course, given consideration to the applicant especially, I would be hopeful that our administration would be able to work quite closely with the applicant and with the state government to try and find an outcome to structure plan this site. It is a priority. Of course, our activity centre here in Joondalup is a priority as well that needs to be reviewed, coming up to the end of its review period. But it is a priority, and being a secondary centre with active development considerations at the moment, it makes in some cases those discussions easier. Rather than trying to impose a structure plan on a site where there isn't engagement between the different landowners, which in some cases can cause those discussions to fall away. So if the applicant and the other parties are willing to engage, I'm sure the city will be very careful to consider that it is a clear priority for us, and it is an important outcome for the council.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your deputation today, Mayor Kingston and Catherine. Thank you for taking all of our questions.
The next deputation.
At this point, can I just say you have been incredibly respectful as we've listened to the deputies so far, and I do hope and I'm sure that that will continue as we go through the next deputation. Thank you very much.
The next deputation is from the applicant, Jeremy Hoffland, Greg Rowe, Howard Mitchell and Ryan Sen. Thank you. Your PowerPoint presentation has been displayed on the screen, so over to you when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. My name's Greg Rowe. I'm the Principal of Rowe Group. We are the town planning consultants for the applicant. With me today is Mr. Jeremy Hoffland from our office, Senior Town Planner charged with the carriage of this application. Mr. Howard Mitchell, the Landscape Architect for the project, and Mr. Ryan Sen, the Project Architect. We do have online, I understand, and it's been confirmed that we have consultants to this project in the fields of traffic, acoustic, waste management, economic benefit, civil engineering and drainage engineering, and ESD, if the Commission would wish to ask questions of those consultants. Mr. Hoffland and Mr. Mitchell will present the greater part of our deputation, but as I've been involved in this development aspiration for the entire time the applicant has owned the land, it might be helpful for me to provide some background if the Commission would need to have questions answered prior to the application timetable. Chair, there was also some comments made earlier, and I don't propose to use up the valuable deputation time, about the Pioneer Quarry versus City of Brisbane court case. We don't believe that's germane to this matter. I don't propose to say anything other than in response to any questions the Commission may have, but we have researched that case. The proponents owned this land and adjacent properties since the early 1990s. The same applicant developed the adjoining Warwick Shopping Centre and other commercial activities at that time, and our client also developed the majority of the commercial development that is in the Warwick Commercial Centre, which is the subject of this application. During the course of the assessment of this application, there's been some criticism and some observations made about the lack of a structure plan. There isn't a structure plan. You've heard some explanation of that from the City already in a deputation. We've been involved in all of that time. Our dialogue originally started in 2007 with the City, culminating in 2010 in the lodgement of a formal structure plan application. That was declined by the City to go any further. On at least two other occasions, we've attempted to invigorate that discussion and that progression of a plan of some sort over the entire precinct. All of those overtures have been unsuccessful. If there was to be a structure plan, it might likely include all of the Warwick Commercial Centre, the area around the subject application, the Warwick Shopping Centre itself, and land parcels owned by the City. So far, in all of that time, other than one brief instance where the adjoining landowner showed some interest in engaging in the structure plan process and then withdrew, we have not been able to invigorate any interest from the City or the surrounding landowner, the principal landowner. And as a result, contrary to an answer that was given to one of your questions earlier, the applicant has seen no other choice but to progress with a development application. Best we understand, this development application represents the largest affordable housing project in one location in the whole of the metropolitan area. The application was lodged in December 23 and we've been in engagement with the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage since that time. We attended a pre-lodgement meeting in November 23. We attended a formal State Design Review Panel meeting in March 24, and we have been in continuous dialogue with department officers since. It's true to say that we haven't received the support of the design review process, but we have made a number of changes to the originally lodged application, and those changes were an endeavour to recognise and incorporate some of the queries that came out of the assessment process. The entire application comprises 7 buildings and 1,040 apartments in various configurations. The request before you today, however, is for only 2 of those buildings to facilitate the project proceeding. This will deliver 202 apartments in the northern part of the site. These buildings are what we have described as the most modest of the buildings that were proposed in the entire application in terms of bulk and scale, and the buildings that are most compliant with the town planning framework and assessment that we've been party to. We have on a number of occasions attempted to engage with relevant agencies with respect to community benefit and community outcomes. These proposals and suggestions have not been engaged by those agencies. We have suggested there are opportunities to include, and we have offered, upgrading of public transport network connecting to the nearby train station at Warwick, improvements and additional infrastructure in the nearby regional open space, upgrades to the surrounding road network and public infrastructure, and you have heard today our attempts to engage in upgrading or reconfiguring the council drainage facility. All of these overtures have been declined, rejected, but not taken up. There is currently an opportunity to deliver apartments in this location in the current economic cycle. To miss this cycle could affect the ability to deliver housing and an outcome in a timely manner. Chair and Commissioners, there is a lot of background to this. I don't propose to go there. I'd pass to Mr. Hofflin now to present in more detail. Mr. Hofflin will then pass to Mr. Mitchell. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners, City of Joondalup and Department staff and persons in the gallery. My name is Jeremy Hofflin from Row Group. If we could just move to the first slide, please. As you'd be aware, the overall proposal as lodged in December 23 was for a total of 1,040 apartments across 7 buildings. There was commercial floor space on the ground floor. Second slide, please. We note the recommendation that's been put forward by staff is for refusal. And I don't know what's happened there. It's rather blurred, but certainly, sorry, could you pause? I'm having trouble reading it. It looks like one is overlaying the other. Okay,
may I just confirm if we're on the correct slide for you now?
That looks better. Thank you very much. Noting the recommendation for refusal, that doesn't represent the proponent's recent request to the SDAU. I'll just work off a hard copy. It doesn't represent the proponent's recent request to the SDAU, which was approval for buildings A and B only, and the balance to be deferred pending a separate and subsequent determination following the additional engagement by the proponent and the department and relevant government agencies. This is set out in option 1, which is actually at attachment 18 of the WAPC agenda, not 14. Sorry for the typo. In terms of the approval for buildings A and B, we note from our own assessment and also the observations within the planning report on this item that the assessment indicates that the buildings A and B are capable of approval, subject to the imposition of suitably worded approval conditions. And the approval to buildings A and B would not prejudice the development of the remainder of the site either through the subsequent determination of the balance of the application or a structure plan for the activity centre, being the broader location. In terms of the deferral, as detailed at item B of option 1, at attachment 18, the deferral would be to allow for the engagement with government agencies, completion of any amendments and additional information for lodgement by the 30th of June 2026, and then determination by the WAPC as soon as practicable, noting that the broader context of that resolution also captures potential consultation and other engagement with government agencies. The proponent is supportive of the above approach and the ability to complete those associated tasks within the specified timeframe. Don't know what's happening with this slide. The housing crisis, I won't go on about it. Everybody knows about it. This is just from Monday's newspaper. It was a collection of articles that were published there. I guess what is more relevant is that in terms of the crisis we're currently in, whilst more than 20,000 homes were completed in Western Australia in 2024, it still falls well short of the target of 24,000 homes per year. This data that we have reviewed, which is a combination of research undertaken by Curtin University and Bankwest, indicates, between March 23 and December 24, there was a shortage of 7,700 rental homes in the Perth metropolitan region. The median weekly rent of $740 a week represents a 76% increase since 2020. There's currently around 4,000 properties for sale, where there should be around 12,000 in a normal market. In relation to the Warwick locality, we note that at the time of the Part 17 application lodgement in December 23, the median house price was $663,000 for a single house. That rose by 20% to $800,000 during the 23-24 financial year.
Excuse me, Jeremy, just to let you know, you are running over time and the Commission is very aware of the housing crisis. So if there are any other planning matters that you wish to raise, it might be worth moving on to those.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. I will conclude then. I understand that you would have no doubt read the slides. You'd be familiar of the background and prior experience our client has. And on that basis, I will...
I'm happy for you to finish your slides if you want to move through those quickly.
Okay. Well, so, thank you. In terms of the slides you're viewing there are a number of existing projects which the proponent has undertaken, which is in North Perth, currently under construction at 4 stories. There's a medical and office development at 3 stories in Woodvale that's currently under construction, and Bank Street, East Victoria Park, which was approved under the Part 17 framework approximately 12 months ago. Excuse me, and we'll be starting construction in the first quarter of 2026. The client has over 40 years experience construction in this field, and as you'd see from the examples, if we can move to the next slide, please, there's a range of apartment and hotel developments that have been completed within Perth and also across capital cities through the East Coast, ranging in height and a number of apartments of several hundred apartments and up to 41 stories. So certainly has a track record and experience. In terms of his business model, what he has indicated is that as his company incorporates a building company, he's able to undertake the construction process and have a greater ability to manage construction costs. That's also a model that we understand is followed by a number of other major apartment companies in Perth, and certainly it seems to be the method that they are being delivered in the current environment. That is where I'll conclude things, and I'll hand across to Mr. Mitchell.
We've really run over time now. Can I just ask, in terms of comments from Howard and Ryan, perhaps they might just have to be fleshed out through questions, unless there was just a very, very high level overview, but we are, we've already provided additional time. So I would just ask if you could just make a very brief comment over 1 minute.
Sorry, very brief comment, that's fine. My position here as Principal Main Director of EPCAD is to reinforce the technical abilities of achieving a transition from a commercial and suburban environment to a new urban landscape. And when I say urban landscape, I do include the built forms themselves. There's been several comments and criticisms received through the last few years in terms of the abilities to deliver this technically. And I was here to reassure through some technical examples of how we've achieved that on other sites, on how it has been achieved on other urban sites within central Perth with the same constraints.
Howard, thank you. So are you, I think if you can be available to take questions as you are, and you might get some around things like the basement, feasibility, etc., then we can come back to you if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Ryan, would you like to make some very brief comments? You're happy to take questions? Okay, all right. Commission members, over to you for questions. Commissioner Sandry.
Thank you, Chair. I'll probably start just thank you for your deputations. It was raised that the owner also has a subsidiary building company. Can you please advise what tier that building company is, and do they have the capability and the licensing to be able to deliver this project?
Well, thank you for your question through the Chair. Our client is a registered builder, has developed more than 2,400 apartments across the nation. The model that that company employs is to direct employ labour and supply and contractors. The way it's been described to us is that it helps with the notion of the viability of the subcontract trades and the availability of the subcontract trades. In terms of our client's financial capacity, that hasn't been questioned historically and has not been questioned in this instance. We're instructed that the finance is available for the entire project, so the notion of proceeding with the first 2 buildings isn't problematic in that regard.
Thank you. Through the Chair, I wasn't asking about the client's financial viability in terms of to deliver, but more specifically regarding the construction piece, so I appreciate that. In terms of direct employment of subcontractors, etc., but are they able to, under their registered building licence, to deliver this project?
Yes, they are, Chair, and I didn't answer the question. I apologise. Our client would, I think, regard their organisation as a high-end Tier 2, verging Tier 1.
Thank you. And if I can just have some clarity and some background regarding your request for just consideration of buildings A and B and the remainder to be put to the side for now. When was that approach made to the department, and was there a consideration to actually modify your application at any point? Through the Chair. The dates, these specific dates are listed in the report in front of you, prepared by the officers of the department. It is a recent eventuality. The notion of whether the entire project would be supported by the department brought that into sharp focus. So the notion was, in a sense of expedition, that we needed to change our request to keep the project alive and to continue with the hope of developing some outcome in the way of residential built form over the next several years. So we did make a request to modify the application. It was put to us that we should withdraw the balance of the application, and in a meeting with the Deputy Director General, I indicated that we would take that request to our client. Our client's instruction was that the best we could offer in that regard as a compromise was to seek approval of the first 2 buildings, A and B, and to keep the balance of the application alive in the current process for further engagement with the department and agencies. And the main purpose of that, as I understand the instruction, is so that we can expedite, hopefully, an outcome for the balance of the development rather than start again. We have been in this process for over 2.5 years, and I think there was a formidable view that to start again was not efficient in terms of time and cost.
Go ahead, Commissioner Hall.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for your deputation. I'm just curious, the structure plan that was lodged in 2010, what did that actually propose for this site?
Thank you, through the chair, it was not of this form of development. It was not in terms of the yield as high. I've not reviewed the entire original application, but it did propose high density residential. It did not propose as many apartments, and it was in a more modest scale of built form.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question, if I may. Looking forward then and hearing from the City of Joondalup, their timeline and level of commitment going forward for a precinct structure plan, how would that fit in with your perspective?
Simply put, Chair, it would not. Our view is that the notion of delivering a precinct structure plan or a structure plan of any nature is not a quick process. We are well experienced in structure plans. We prepare many of them for broadacre subdivision and for major built form. I think the notion of the level of interest that has been displayed in this development application would likely come to bear on a structure plan process, which is fine. It's the process and it's available, but we would not see a realistic proposition, and we've discussed this with council staff, that a structure plan would be achieved in less than 2 to 3 years, and then we would need to enter into the development application process again. It is totally conceivable, likely, that the process could be a 3 to 6 year timeline. That's untenable from our client's point of view, and I would hope the Commission might see that way. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just you mentioned earlier that there were a number of potential benefits that could be provided. You mentioned around drainage, parks, and some intersection upgrades. I'm just wanting to understand that in a little bit more detail, if I can, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. When we were engaging with the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, it was put to us on a number of occasions that we should consider community benefit as part of this development application. We took that to the proponent and were instructed to enter into discussions on that basis. The first one that came to mind to us as a consultant, and we were quite keen to pursue, was the notion of providing additional and more regular and frequent bus services between this location and the shopping centre and the Warwick train station. That proposal was discussed at a high level with transport authorities, but the engagement went no further. We were not able to invigorate any interest. We have done that on a number of other applications in Osborne Park and at Karrinyup Shopping Centre, where the proponent does provide additional services for a period. I explained that history, the background that we had successfully achieved. We weren't able to invigorate that conversation. We also looked at the notion of dealing with the council's drainage, and the topic you've already heard about today. On at least 3 occasions, I met at the city with the city's officers to talk about either enhancing or relocating or changing the drainage facilities to improve into a more engaging outcome. Originally, there was some support for that at officer level, but it went no further. Over the same period, we discussed the notion of engaging with the city and some sort of redevelopment or joint venture on the council's facilities, the community facilities. I understand it's either Meals on Wheels or seniors, but the notion of bringing that into the development or redeveloping what we had been told was a dilapidated facility. We had, from memory, 3 meetings. The officers seemed quite keen. I was told at the 3rd meeting that there'd been a matter put to council and a decision not to proceed with any engagement on that particular site. It wasn't a priority. We've talked on a number of occasions about upgrading nearby streets, providing streetscaping, intersection improvements, whatever might arise from the application. We've not been able to further those discussions. We talked briefly with the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage about either an interpretive centre or landscaping or enhancement for public access, of the nearby regional open space. Those conversations did not progress. Thank you.
So just to follow up then, so as part of this application, just understanding from what you're saying, none of those proposals, despite your best efforts, are included as part of this application?
Through you, Chair, no, they are not. We were not in a position to be definitive enough to include anything meaningful. We have not resiled from that proposition, and I would expect if the Commission saw fit to adopt our preferred option 1 recommendation, those matters would be resurrected in the discussion about the balance of the development of the site.
Thank you. Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. Thank you for the deputation. So a couple of questions. The first one, and Jeremy spoke to the request for deferral and the actions you would take during that deferral period. Could you be a little bit more specific about the particular components of the proposal you would seek to refine during a deferral period, should one be granted? I do note in asking the question the concerns that have been raised by the State Design Review Panel, and keen to understand what appetite there is for refinements to address those concerns, and questions that were raised around transport modelling and requesting for further information, but a decline by the proponent to provide any more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. If I could deal with the last observation first. I think it'd be fair to say that the applicant eventually developed application fatigue in terms of the ongoing requests for additional information as the application unfolded. We were never able to close out those requests completely. So in the interest of determining the application, we did make a submission to the department to say that we wanted the application determined without further work on those areas that we believed had already been adequately dealt with and submitted. Turning to your first part of your question, Commissioner, we are happy to engage in all of those issues again in terms of some design outcomes. We do not agree with all of the observations made by the design review process. We have a view either some of the calculations that have been put to us are not consistent with our calculations. We would like to explore that further. We are aware that there's been some discussion that the 3 tower buildings may be too close to each other. We say not so. We say that we've met the criteria required, but they remain as a controversial point of discussion. And we have examined the notion of how we could change that separation amongst the 3 towers, which seems to be quite a strong point. And the other discussion has been about the mix of the type and typology of apartments and the proportions that we've provided in the 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom configurations. So we are open to discussing that further.
Thank you for the response. So just to follow on some of the more specific matters that are contained in the report, there's reference to the provision of car parking and the number of car bays that are provided and the proximity to the Warwick station. So you spoke about a potential community benefit of being upgraded to public transport to support the proposal. From what I understand, the application is over providing in terms of car parking bays, but potentially shortfall in terms of bicycle parking. Can you just talk a little bit about the overall transport strategy for the site?
Through you, Chair, I might start, and if I stumble on some of the detail, I'll pass to Mr. Hoffland. The first point in regard to the number of car bays, across the project, it's 1.3 bays on average per dwelling. We don't believe that's excessive. There is the notion of needing cars for people that live in, or we expect to live in this development. We are quite keen to embrace public transport, and you've heard my response in regard to bus connection to train. That's still alive and we'd like to pursue that. But the reality of it is that other than workday trips, there are people who need to make other trips that aren't facilitated by bus or rail. People may need to have recreation opportunities that require a car. We don't believe that 1.3 car bays per dwelling on average is excessive. Your second part of your question was in regard to bicycles. The report says there are none. That's not accurate with respect. The way we have dealt with this on other projects and the way we intend to deal with it on this project is rather than the minimum store size, we increase the store size by 50%, generally to 6 square metres. And if there are bicycles required, they can be facilitated in those stores. Our clients' experience and our practices' experience is that communal areas of bicycles present a risk in regard to theft and damage, and the notion of private secured bicycle lockers within stores is our preferred solution. We can meet the criteria that's identified in the report. It's not accurate to say there are none, but it is accurate to say there are none shown external to the stores. Thank you.
Commissioner Adair and then Commissioner Lakey.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to dig in a little further on one of Commissioner Bennett's questions. And for the benefit of everybody here, we did receive a letter dated the 1st of December, which you have referred to. In the bottom of page 1, there are 2 arrow points. The first one requests an approval of buildings A and B, and arrow point 2, the balance of the application to be deferred pending further engagement with government agencies and the lodgement of any amended plans and or additional information with the department by the 30th of June. I understand about fatigue. You know, these things go on for a long time. This application's been going since October of 2023. So can you please just be clearer? And, you know, Greg, you did mention that a lot of design issues in your response to that question, and you said that you're the team, and I understand you are one of a team, so I don't know that you'll answer this, felt that those issues had been adequately covered to bring this forward to us, and also that you didn't necessarily agree with some of those points that were made in the design. So can you just elaborate, please, which agencies are you referring to when you say in your letter that they'd be referred to further agencies? And can you explain to me why it hasn't been undertaken in this DA process so far? What would happen in the next 6 months that would materially change this for us?
Thank you, Commissioner, through the Chair. First observation in regard to your query is that the wording that we have referred to was crafted by the department in terms of the deadline dates. I was asked by the Director General if we were happy to work to a timeframe. In fact, the Director General asked me what the timeframe might be. I did, in response to that question, indicate that our timeframe was certainly to re-engage if that Part B was adopted in the first half of next calendar year. So we are owners of that date. It's ended up in the report from the department, but we don't resist that date. In terms of the agencies that we believe we should engage with, that I think I would hope is evident from the report, but certainly the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage and its design review process. Department of Transport, Main Roads has made a submission. We would endeavour to address that query. There is only one road that is in the jurisdiction of Main Roads, pardon me, and the local government, I think, would definitely be part of that engagement process. We now have a much clearer line of sight on what some of the issues are. We would hope that in that timeframe we can persuade the design review process and the department that our interpretation of some of those criteria, which is what I referred to in response to a query from Commissioner Bennett, is that we have an interpretation of some of those criteria, which we've only heard about in the report. Some of it has not been shared with us prior to that time. As an illustrative but not limited example, the shadow analysis has been, we believe, dealt with in a 2-dimensional way. We have some 3-dimensional modelling that shows much more aligned to compliance outcome. We would like some time to explain that in more detail now that we are aware of that criticism. There are a number of other items in the report that were not brought to our attention previously, which we're more than happy to engage with. I accept the consideration that 6 months is tight, but we needed to commit to a timeline to obtain that alternate recommendation.
Commissioner Lakey.
Thank you. Greg, a question for you. In your presentation there, or Jeremy's presentation, there was a comment that approving buildings A and B would not prejudice the development of the remainder of the site. In other words, buildings C to G. I'd just like you to talk through that a bit, because ultimately it's one application and we're looking at a part approval. And I'd just like to understand and appreciate your view on how that doesn't prejudice it.
Thank you, through you, Chair. We chose those two buildings for a number of reasons, which my explanation hopefully will go to your question. They are on the perimeter. They take access predominantly from existing established and legal access routes. They are, relative to the rest of the project, modest in scale in terms of height and bulk. They, in terms of the first building, relates to the street and the potential development to the north side of the Northern Road. And so as a result of that, we don't believe that access will be compromised for the balance of the precinct. And we don't believe that in terms of shadow, proximity to other buildings, the rest of the precinct will be disadvantaged. It was quite a deliberate choice to bring those two buildings forward.
Thanks, Greg. Part of the SDRP, I know we've had a couple of conversations or questions about the SDRP. The SDRP, I understand, was more of an assessment of all 7 buildings and a broader viewpoint of the proposal. How do you think that their comments relate directly to buildings A and B?
Through you, Chair, not so much, to be truthful. The experience we had with the design review panel process and the department, we characterised as a predetermined view on the scale and the bulk of the buildings. And we took the view that that was reflected in some of the observations and comments we received. There seemed to be a predisposition against the density and in particular the height of 3 of the buildings. We acknowledged that, we accepted that and moved forward with it. Most of the observations made in regard to the design review panel process, in our view, reflected the scale of the 3 taller buildings and were not so much reflective of observations of the smaller buildings or that were proposed in the 7 building application. That's not to say, though, there were not observations made about all of the buildings, and I would accept that some of those observations may still be pertinent to the 2 buildings we're seeking approval for. There were observations about the typology mix. The typology mix in the first 2 buildings is more aligned to 2-bedroom solutions with some 3-bedroom solutions. There was a criticism across the entire project about a lack of 3-bedroom opportunities, but not, in my view, so much to buildings A and B. There was also reference to lack of access to natural sunlight and natural ventilation. We have, as I explained to 2 of the commissioners previously, the view that we do meet those criteria. We accept that we do not meet them in every apartment, in every instance. That is our view, not the intention of the codes, but rather to achieve an acceptable level in an acceptable number of apartments. We say we satisfy that. So we don't see or are so fearful of the criticism of the design review process on buildings A and B as was the view across the 7 buildings. Notwithstanding that response to your question, there are 50 conditions proposed on the application if buildings A and B are approved, and a number of them go to design refinements. We are accepting of the conditions. We can work with them. There is a lot of conditions, but we need to get the approval, and we will work with the conditions that deal with design elements in that fashion.
Thank you, Greg. Just a slight change of tact. I'd like to explore a little bit about the affordable housing component, and you mentioned that a lot, and I read your proposal. I just want to understand the mechanism proposed to maintain the affordable housing and the sort of the percentages, the process. Have you engaged with the CHP, etc.? If you just could expand on that, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. So through the chair, this might be the most difficult question I need to field today because it is an undefined science. We have always represented this application as having an affordable housing component and to be characterised as an affordable housing development. We understand, as does the proponent, the criteria to determine affordable housing. And to summarise, the state has taken the view that an affordable home is one that consumes no more than 30% of a disposable income or available gross income. We understand that criteria. Our brief and instruction, if this question arose today, is that the intention is to provide 80 to 85% of the dwellings in the overall development, and in stages A and B, 80%, to meet that criteria. We have held preliminary discussions with community housing providers. There is no commitment in place. There is no engagement in place. It is very difficult to predetermine sales prices, particularly in this volatile market. I'm not instructed to discuss sales prices, not simply to avoid it. I don't have that information, but the position has changed somewhat since we started this application. But we are aware of the criteria and objectives of the state in that regard, and that's how we've struck those numbers that I've quoted.
Thank you.
Greg, thank you very much. I have a couple of questions. I just wanted to ask, just in relation to some of the feedback that you've provided today about having a better illustration of issues that have raised through the report and having a line of sight. I just do read the report from the SDAU as being quite consistent in terms of the advice provided to the applicant from pre-lodgement onwards. And I did want to ask, for example, with feedback from the State Design Review panel, were you provided with the SDRP report? And in terms of feedback, referral feedback from agencies, particularly DOT, Main Roads, WA, PTA, in relation to further information that they were seeking for the transport impact assessment. Did you receive that referral advice, and was that clear in terms of what those agencies were seeking of you? I ask that because I note that that was one of the outstanding requests for information that was outstanding at the time that this application was requested to go forward for determination. So just on those 2 points, as an illustration, I'm wondering what level of information you did have.
Chair, thank you. The answer is yes. I believe we received all of the information that's been referred to in the reports. Whether we received it direct from those agencies or paraphrased might be a mixture. The design review panel minutes we did receive. We did attempt to make, and we did make some changes to recognise some of the questions and the points put forward. We found it difficult to extract advice or recommendation from the design review panel as to what might be the solutions they were fetching up and after, but we made best endeavours to do that. At some point during the course, however, the applicant took the view that the applicant had an understanding of what the applicant could build at a cost and what the market might be willing to accept in this location. That was, we acknowledge, in a number of instances at odds with the design review panel position. We took the view that if we were to incorporate all of those changes, we would not be able to build this development. They became prohibitive in terms of cost increases and changes that would not address a decision that had been made about the marketability of the dwellings. From the other agencies and the transport portfolio particularly, we found the request from Main Roads somewhat nefarious in terms of simply wanting more information that was not well defined in our view. We tried to have a best effort at that, and we did make some supplementary submissions. Department of Transport was a little more clear, to be truthful, and at the end of the day, Department of Transport's recommendation when our application was for 7 buildings was to support buildings A and B at that time, which is ironic in terms of where we've landed. In terms of PTA, we did endeavour to address the queries that PTA raised, and one way that we saw fit to do that was to make the offer to fund additional buses and additional routes and an extended timetable. We met with the PTA to explore that, and that meeting, although polite, was not able to take the matter any further.
Thank you very much, Greg. I have another question. It's in relation to structure planning, which has been discussed much with the City of Joondalup today. Look, we understand, of course, that it is possible for a DA to come forward without a structure plan in a centre zone, and that clause 16(1)(a) of the deemed provisions allow that, provided that certain precinct planning considerations are taken into consideration. That's outlined in relation to that on page 27 of the report. In the SDAU has raised a number of matters that they believe would need to be addressed through the DA. And I just wanted to give you the opportunity to refer to that and to let us know whether you believe that those additional planning elements in the absence of a structure plan have been addressed through your development application.
Chair, thank you. We believe they have. We believe the weight that should be put on those matters is proportionate to the extent of the development. We are asking for approval now of approximately 200 dwellings in a suite of 1,000 dwellings. The matters that were raised and are raised in the report that you've referred to, we say are dealt with in the context of a 200 dwelling approval. If they need to be expanded upon to achieve a balance of the 5 additional buildings, then we would need to undertake to do that. But we do need to understand in more detail where the SDAU believes we are deficient in those areas. And that's why I discussed with the Director General the notion of a 6-month hiatus to achieve that.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, are there any further questions? Commissioner Sandry.
Thank you, and thank you for the responses. When this pathway opened, it was unique insofar as you could apply for applications that may have not previously been able to be considered under existing pathways. Since the creation of the Part 17, which as we know is concluding, the Part 11B pathway is available. Now that Part 11B is available, would the approach to this application would it have been the same when you had lodged, or would you have considered it in a different way now?
Through you, Chair. That is an awkward hypothetical. We did elect to go through the Part 17 process because we had no other option. We had exhausted the options of a structure plan. We were not confident that we would obtain the support of the local government through a development application. We are not seeking in this application, either for the 2 buildings or the 7 buildings, anything that could not be approved with the discretion that is already available to the alternate pathways. However, we took the view that the Part 17 would remove some of the issues and concerns that we had already encountered. So it was unashamedly our decision to use the Part 17 as the only option, viable option available to us. If your question is that had there been some other equivalent pathway at that time, we would have elected to do that if it gave the same opportunity to obtain an approval as the 17 did. If your question is, would we stop and start again now in the knowledge that 11B exists? Probably not. If we had no background, it would still be the only viable option for us, 11B. We're not in that position. We are 3 years in and we're seeking an approval. We're at the table seeking the approval. It's untenable from both our perspective, our proponents' perspective, and we would say from the state's perspective, to make us start again under any scenario, under any model, including structure planning, if we have no approval to work with while we entertain any other pathway. We need to get on. Thank you.
Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you for your patience with all of the questions. The question perhaps for the architect and the landscape architect. So one of the matters that's been raised and caused community concern is the interface to the public realm to the north and the existing residential fabric to the north, which is largely low-rise residential single story. The building A at the boundaries set back 2 metres and the basement car parking for A and B, and then potentially in the future towers behind basically fills those lots. Could you please speak to what considerations being given to the interface to the residential dwellings to the north with the design of buildings A and B, particularly A, and also the consideration for deep soil zone as well?
I'll start to answer some of those questions. First of all, in terms of the last part, deep soil zones, we came across this project, or our approach to the project was that it is an urban cell and is no different to us technically in delivering a large building in central Perth. That's the approach that was taken technically. We were very aware of car parking constraints and the footing constraints of any building. Even if it was an 11-story building, it would require the same type of approach as we are dealing with now, which is to create deep root zones over and above a slab. And I shall say that it is a concrete impermeable slab. And this is no different to Central Park, which is shared by 3 owners in the centre of the city. 3 separate buildings with one large one large shared car park in the basement. That whole park, which is an intrinsically important urban space in central Perth, is all delivered on a concrete slab. And we were involved in that and the refurbishment of it. It was delivered, I think, about 30 years ago. I seem to remember it being implemented. One of our clients wanted to refurbish it. We refurbished that in 2015, I believe it was. So that is all on slab, and it has very mature trees throughout that space and is a well occupied and popular urban space. So in terms of creating deep root zones, you don't have to create those zones contiguously with the geotechnical underneath of any space. And within an urban framework, that's the approach that was taken technically on this project. Part of that also would be taken in urban water management drainage of those spaces within those soft areas. They become an interface. It's a very well established technique. It was used on the bus port in down by the exhibition centre, by the down adjacent the river. It was used on Council House, the refurbishment of Council House. Sterling Gardens behind Council House might be perceived as a space, but that is all on a slab. The architects were Peter Hunt and we were the landscape architects. The front of Council House, which is all green, part of the urban fabric, that is all on a slab. It's perceived as not being, but it is technically very well established how to do that. So that's number one in terms of the deep root zones. We acknowledged and we presented this information to SDRU and to the design review panel, and I don't think it was accepted because nobody else seems to have the experience of delivering such urban spaces within central Perth. So we're going back to its relationship across the road to the north, and I'll let my colleague here also mention his design responses to that. However, we did look at the relationship. The relationship is down at present to some smaller dwellings. However, all shading, etc., is to the south of that. So the spatial relationship, there is a visual one of a streetscape, which at the moment could be enhanced, and very definitely within these proposals, you'll see that the whole verge area not only retains the existing vegetation, but it is a proposal to enhance that verge area right up to the road edge, so that there is a respect of a change in character that is taken across a very broad road reserve. So very definitely on the approach taken to development that faces there, we were looking to get an enhanced interface. And that again is shown very definitely in the drawings against building A. We also did, as has been previously stated, look at how we could knit this development more closely into the broader landscape. And we investigated links up to the reserve, which we felt were important. And that was looked at, but hasn't progressed because we felt that that was an unused reserve to the northeast, a substantial area of urban greenery, and we could look at managed access into that reserve and to that reserve in terms of enhancing those links. But again, that's one aspect that hasn't progressed, not without trying. And I think the third point was on the criticisms that we received in terms of the spatial qualities of the landscape related to the broader area. But most importantly, I believe in terms of the two buildings which are before you now, spatially originally, we looked at this as a series of linked spaces. And there's three aspects of an urban landscape. One is its contextual relevance, which we've just been talking about. Two is the technical ability to deliver it, which we've just been talking about. And three really is to do with its spatial design and the qualities of that spatial design. We would normally take a lot more trouble designing those spaces when we know the community's requirements. But the community's requirements here, it's not the broader communities, because these are private open spaces which are accessible to the broader community, but they're private open spaces. And they relate very much to the demographic that we are expecting to move in. And that information would come through the design process with our client to deliver that target audience. And we haven't got to that stage yet. We don't know whether it's going to be predominantly couples with young children or whatever. And that would be the detailed responses to those spaces. So to an extent, the comments that were made for further information arising through, if this development was to proceed as was outlined by Mr. Rowe, we would be looking at those sorts of changes being refined through the ongoing detailed design.
Just going to ask the architect around the 2 metre setback and the building interface. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So in terms of the design of the building and respecting to the low-rise residentials across the road, we have designed it in a way that the bottom two levels of the buildings with high transparency, with high portions of glass to reduce the bulk impact to the adjoining properties across the road, and high levels of privacy screens has been introduced to the facade to maintain that visual privacy and respect and the amenity to reduce the impact to the amenity across the road.
Commissioner, through the chair, I might add from an urban design point of view, that particular road, Ellersdale Avenue, is not extraordinarily wide, but wider than typical. We think it's a 25-metre reserve. There is the development potential across the road that has not yet been achieved in terms of the density codes that apply. I don't have it open, but R60, R80. The extent of the reduced setback that you've referred to is modest in terms of the overall length of the commercial park. But perhaps more importantly, one of our considerations was the notion that there is commercial floor space proposed there. We wanted that on the pavement for interaction. And the final consideration was the notion of having dwellings that had a direct urban relation to the street from a septed point of view. So there were a number of considerations rather than a slavish, that's my word, adherence to a significantly greater setback. We didn't see it necessary, and we saw there was merit in bringing it closer to the street.
Commissioner Brooks.
In relation to the water management for the site, the buildings proposed to include storage underground, which seems to be reliant on the existing sump via pumped discharges. Now, looking at the concept for the broader area, it appears that that sump is gone in that concept. I guess I'd like to understand how you would see that the loss of that sump being reconciled against building of both buildings A and B, and then presumably other buildings under the same kind of approach. how you would reconcile those two things with the loss of the sump and the reliance on pumped discharges from all of the buildings.
Chair, through you, I will not attempt to answer the detail of that question, and I'm hopeful that our hydrology engineer, Mr. Julian Lemachand, is still online. Perhaps we could pause there, and if the Commissioner would be good enough, that question to him.
Julian will be appearing online. He has just accepted the request to be promoted to panelist.
Good afternoon. My name is Julian Lemachand. Just in reference to the question about the reliance on the existing basin, we believe, given the circumstances, our only option was to utilise this existing basin. The information provided was by the city on the external catchment, what was entering this basin was uncertain, and we would require further information of the topography of the area for to study that catchment that this basin is currently used for.
Commissioner Brooks, do you have anything further? Any follow-up questions?
I guess I'm trying to understand that if these two first buildings, buildings A and B, were progressed with pumped discharges from on-site storage that relied on that external basin, there's a broader concept that's been provided to understand how the whole precinct might function that shows development and landscaping over the existing basin. And I guess I'm just trying to understand if there's been some consideration of how that would be achieved with each of the buildings reliant on a pump discharge into that basin.
So there'd be some sort of modification, possibly converting that basin into an underground storage with a public open space above it as part of the master concept plan. There would be further investigation required and detail to ascertain and make sure that there's enough capacity for that basin, as well as all the additional storage required following the development of the area.
Thank you very much, Julian. There's no further questions, I believe you, unless any other members do have any water management questions. Thank you. Members, are there any last questions for the applicants? No, thank you very much. We do appreciate the time that you've taken to answer all of our questions today. Thank you. The Commission has also received 6 written deputations from people mainly describing themselves as residents. Of 4 of the 6, they have clearly indicated that they support the recommendation for refusal. 2 others indicated that they did not support the recommendation for refusal, but in reading the context of their written submissions, it appears that they do. The Commission support team did make efforts to reach out to all deputies that had provided written deputations to clarify, but in relation to those last residents, Christine Kelly and Kirsty Pearce, there was not able to be absolute clarification on that. So we have not given a view on whether that's support or refuse, but we take the context of their written applications at face value. We will now go to the presentation of the key issues by the State Development Assessment Unit of the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, and we're joined by Paola De Perna and Katrina Marchbank. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. The proposed $278 million development before the Commission today is for the construction of a mixed-use development comprising of 7 buildings, commonly referred to as buildings A to G, which range in height from 7 to 25 stories, located in the northern portion of the Warwick Activity Centre. The proposal includes, holistically, 1,040 apartments with 375 square metres of commercial space across the 7 buildings. The application is for determination under Part 17, which does provide the Commission with broad powers, and other than the environmental protection provisions, the Commission is not bound by any planning or non-planning law. However, in making the decision, the Commission must have due regard to the 4 matters as outlined in the Chair's opening statement. The Commission must also give regard to submissions received from the Minister, relevant state agencies, local government and members of the public. What the Commission must decide today is whether the application and the current design have been able to address the matters raised during the technical assessment of the proposal, design review, stakeholder and public submissions. As you've heard in the applicant's deputation and as detailed in the report, the applicant seeks to stage the determination of the application in that buildings A and B be determined or be approved and deferral of buildings C to G. This request was received by the department on the 27th of October this year. The request has been considered and the report and assessment has been detailed accordingly. The department has formed the view that under section 274(4), part 4 of the Planning and Development Act, there is a mechanism for a decision to be made in the way in which the application has requested. As set out in the report, the assessment has identified the reasons to both support and present the issues in determining part A, buildings A and B, and as such, it could suggest that it's in keeping with the Part 17 intent in the delivery of housing. However, the Commission must be satisfied that all the matters identified are capable of being addressed through conditions and will not prejudice the overall development of the centre. On balance, the assessment has considered that deferral of part or all of the application could be considered inconsistent with the intent of the pathway. A further delay of the decision of the application, which is already ageing, could be considered beyond the point of being as soon as practicable. It is open to the Commission, however, to consider the options as detailed in the report. For clarity, they include approving buildings A and B and deferring the remainder, approving A and B and refusing the remainder of the development, deferring the whole proposal or refusing the whole proposal. As we have seen from stakeholder and public submissions received during consultation and in the deputation submitted in writing and those heard today, there are significant concerns about the proposed development. These concerns relate to the proposed scale and density of the proposal, its overshadowing, inconsistency with local character, negative impact on amenity of the area, poor quality living environment, traffic servicing, and a lack of open space and tree retention. To those who support the development with changes have identified that redevelopment of the underutilised site and providing additional affordable housing in the area were positives, but were also concerned about the proposed scale of the development. All of the submissions have been considered in the assessment and ultimately informing the report presented to the Commission today. The public advertising of the application has been conducted in accordance with the established processes for Part 17, with a 2-week extension agreed to provide opportunity for everybody to consider this large and complex proposal. For the purposes of reporting, the issues were distilled under key headings contained in the content of all the submissions and the petition signatories. However, all these have been made available to the Commission, and so they are not solely relying on the summary of the issues as presented. State agencies have provided comment on the application, and while some matters such as water supply and wastewater, gas supply could be addressed through conditions, precinct level assessment of impacts such as traffic remain unresolved. To clarify,
The precinct considerations raised by Main Roads have been quite clear, and as detailed in the report, speak to the absence of modelling provided in relation to the potential impacts of the Erindale Road and Beach Road signalised intersection. It's considered that at a precinct level, these are considered important and key considerations, given that the proposed development could generate quite significant impacts on those intersections. I do note that the department did meet with the applicant in regards to community benefit discussions. I referred the members to the chronology of information of the application and highlight that those high-level discussions were in April of this year, with the department suggesting to the applicant that more detail be provided to provide some sufficient understanding as to what was being presented for consideration as part of the application. Such guidance could be afforded both by the department and the PTA. No formal information was provided to the department in this regard. In terms of further comments and feedback received during the consultation period, I do note that the City of Joondalup was consulted and, as outlined today, are not supportive of the application. The department's report has considered an extensive review of a number of components, right from the very beginning of pre-lodgement right through to post-consultation assessment. We acknowledge that some time has passed since the proposal was publicly advertised, but the proposal itself remains substantially unchanged. As set out in the report, the absence of a structure plan of itself is not a fundamental component that would prevent a decision being made on the application. However, the technical analysis to provide a reasonable basis to assess and support a development application is where the department's concerns remain. As outlined in the report, there are significant planning precinct matters that need to be addressed with outcomes informing a DA or further precinct planning processes. The application as submitted does include a concept plan which suggests that this demonstrates, in part with all the supplementary information, that the proposal would not compromise the ability for the structure plan in future. The department's assessment lists consideration of the precinct structure planning principles in clause 16A, and due to the fragmented ownership and the complex cadastral boundaries, land assembly, lot coordination, believes that a structure planning process, together with information that could inform a structure planning process as part of this DA, would be essential to achieving a good planning outcome for the precinct. In terms of building heights, whilst they may have been a concern for many submitters, the department has not focused on building heights of itself, although the assessment of each of the building against the R codes does identify many elements of the R codes have not been met. The issues themselves could be reason not to support the application separately to the broader precinct planning considerations. Whilst earlier commentary was provided in regards to the department's assessment of overshadowing, the assessment of overshadowing was undertaken both in the context of the proposed 7 buildings, as well as the concept plan contemplated by the applicant. At this stage, the applicant's commentary has been isolated to consideration of the proposed 7 buildings. Whilst it's acknowledged that the site has potential to accommodate increased housing density and supply, it is key that revitalisation of the Warwick Centre is much needed. However, there is significant and valid concerns that the proposal in front of the Commission may prejudice outcomes of the future Warwick Centre. These issues arising from the assessment, referrals, design review and public consultation process have been clearly and consistently conveyed through the course of engagement. On balance, the department does recommend refusal of the application as a whole, noting the applicant's requests and options are presented in attachment 18 should the Commission form the view to pursue any of those options. I'm happy to take any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paola, and thank you, Paola and Katina, for the report that you've prepared for this determination. Members, I will go to you for questions. Commissioner Lakey.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Paula, for the presentation. One of the things I'm challenged myself with is the fact that the process that has been carried out by yourselves and the team and the evaluation has been for the full site, the full 7 buildings. The advertising has been for that. The feedback on from all the different agencies in traffic and water has always been for the full 7 buildings. The SDRP was for the broader precinct. The review didn't go into detail on the 2 buildings that we're looking at, or the proponent is asking us to look at in focus, which is buildings A and B. I guess that I question, including the public advertising, whether it would have, all that process would have been different if we had just been looking at buildings A and B in isolation. When you can't preempt outcomes, but in terms of the process and the consideration.
Through the chair, in terms of contemplating a process for a different proposal, you'd be speculating as to whether or not that outcome would be any different. So as a result, I think we have a proposal and an application. The application is for all 7 buildings, albeit that the applicant has requested a part determination. So at no point during the application life has the proposal been modified so much so that it would necessitate re-advertising of the proposal. It did form part of the original application, and whilst there may have been broader concerns about the concept of the development as a whole, any suggestion of what may have occurred or what concerns may or may not have arisen with a smaller component or scale of the development would be highly speculative.
Thanks, Chair. Paula, of the options available to us, one of the ones that you put to us, I want to question, which is approval of A and B and refusal of the rest of the application. In my mind, that's not actually a valid pathway for us. Can you just clarify that that is? I'm not preempting anything. I'm just asking about the different options, because a partial approval and a partial refusal on the same application would be new to me. Let's put it that way.
Through the chair, I'll just consult the section of the Act, if you just bear with me for a moment. Through the chair, section 274 speaks to the determination of the proposal of an application under part 17. In a planning context, it does speak to a determination except for a part. So it does speak to for development, and this is quoting strictly straight out of the legislative framework. It says for proposals, approval can be granted for approvals can be granted for that development except for a part or aspect of that approval specified in the approval. As I understand it, that would mean that an approval can be granted for part and then a separate decision made in relation to the remainder.
Commissioners, just to point out, there was a late email with some additional advice that does touch on this matter and I think is relevant if that's something that you do need to refer to. Questions for SDOU? I'll go to Commissioner Sandry and then Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. Just following on from that, just to confirm, are buildings A and B considered significant development in the department's view?
Through the chair, the value of buildings A and B were verified or confirmed with the applicant. Those do meet the minimum $20 million threshold.
Thank you. And the other consideration for part approval is that it doesn't substantially change the development. Do you think that approval of part A and B and not knowing the outcome of the others would substantially change the application?
Through the chair, in deferring the secondary part of the application, it doesn't change the application unless there were significant modifications to the remaining part of the development. However, that said, in essence, the application would need to remain the same in order for it to be considered a valid modification to the current, to the proposal as it's presented.
Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Paola. A more detailed question, just to clarify something the proponent said in response to questions was around the compliance with the R codes, volume 2 for apartments, and the need to not necessarily comply with for all apartments, but for a portion of the apartments. Could you clarify that statement? Thank you.
Through the chair, as I understand that the commentary was made in relation to overshadowing and the amount of daylight and ventilation that was afforded to each of the apartments. Whilst the R codes does work on the premise of a performance-based approach, as I highlighted, part of the assessment has considered both the overshadowing and the impact of the overshadowings of the buildings on other parts of the buildings, including potentially the impact of the overshadowing on itself. So those impacts were considered by the department in the assessment. There were some concerns raised or highlighted through that process that the placement of the towers does result in self-overshadowing. In addition to that, the concept that was provided wasn't modelled as part of the overshadowing assessment that was provided to the department. The department has gone beyond and done its own modelling and assessment of the overall towers as contemplated, and those towers will impact on including some of those north-facing apartments. So there's quite a compromised outlook in that regard.
Members, any further questions? I just wanted to ask a question. Whilst I don't know that this is well understood in the broader community, it is possible to approve a DA without a structure plan where broader considerations at a precinct level are met. The applicant believes that they have addressed the necessary matters required that would be required by a precinct structure plan in relation to buildings A and B, and I just wanted to give you the opportunity to speak to that.
Through the chair, in response, there has been, given the reduction in the scale of the development, some of the broader precinct planning matters may not be triggered and the isolated location. The report has detailed in terms of the assessment of buildings A and B in the context of the key and principal components. The key concern from the department's assessment has highlighted in regards to drainage and how that drainage will ultimately function in future. If it relies on the current arrangement, that may cement to some extent the drainage infrastructure in the location where it's currently located, and that might not be an optimum outcome if a broader, more strategic approach is taken to drainage and drainage review for the centre.
Thank you. And another question I have is in relation to the applicant speaking today about the ongoing request for information and that sense of application fatigue. And I just wondered if you could outline how responsive you felt the applicant has been to requests for information, whether that material information or changes have been provided in response, and whether the report that is written has given the applicant a clearer line of sight to what they had going through the assessment process.
Through the chair, the application, as I highlighted in the presentation, has gone through quite an extensive process from pre-lodgement all the way through. The department has issued 4 pieces of planning advice during the life of the application cycle. The department has intentionally been clear as to what those key issues are up front in order to afford the applicant the best possible opportunity to work with us to resolve those. The modifications from pre-lodgement right through to determination I would classify as relatively minimal, whilst information has been provided in part to address some of the components. Some of the more fundamental aspects remain unresolved and outstanding from our perspective.
Commissioner Hall.
Thank you, Chair. And we do have the applicant here, and they were probably hoping for a positive recommendation on at least two of the buildings. I just want to be really clear. What would they have to do to get that positive recommendation?
Through the chair, the principles of SPP or the elements of SPP 7.2 would need to be addressed for each of the components relative to buildings A and B. The assessment of the proposal against the principles of or the design requirements of the R codes in particular. The assessment has identified some components already and detailed in the report as to what those key aspects are. For example, a reconfiguration in effect of the waste arrangements for buildings A and B in part, so to consolidate, to create some efficiencies, to consider transitional arrangements, again, as an example, from the lower coded property along Ellensdale, are just 2 of a number of things that have been identified in the assessment that would need to be addressed as part of consideration of A and B alone.
Thank you, through Chair. So on that point, Paola, just to get it absolutely clear in my mind, the outstanding information that you're still waiting for was for the broader proposal for the 7 buildings, but there are still outstanding issues in relation to buildings A and B.
Through the chair, the assessment of A and B has, in isolation of the remainder of the precinct, has only been recently requested as a result of the applicant's request to the Commission for part determination. These haven't been explored or detailed because we were focusing on the macro issues rather than the micro issues of the proposal. For example, there are other components, as I highlighted, drainage being a fundamental one, but also landscaping being another component. So yes, there are still components of the A and B that would need to be resolved. albeit some of those components could be resolved through conditions of approval, should the Commission form the view to proceed down that option.
And just for clarity, you have undertaken an R code assessment of buildings A and B, and that's detailed on pages 34 and 35 of the report.
Through the Chair, that's correct, yes.
Members, are there any further questions? Commissioner Hall?
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to be clear again on the traffic and transport considerations for buildings A and B and whether or not they have been adequately demonstrated and you're satisfied with the planning work that's gone into them, or if there are still outstanding concerns for buildings A and B alone.
Through the Chair, the traffic modelling that's been provided and has been assessed has been on the basis of the whole development. What we have considered is that given the reduction in the scale of the development, it may be capable of being dealt with in isolation at a later point in time, but a upfront assessment of traffic modelling or anything of that nature, because the development of A and B of itself will trigger sufficient traffic flows and generation that would warrant a traffic impact assessment to be prepared.
Anything further, Commissioner Hall? Commissioners, any further questions? Okay, we're ready to deal with the item. Okay, Commissioners, so we have a recommendation, but we also have alternate motions prepared. So I would like to call on a Commissioner to make a decision as to which motion they would wish to move. Commissioner Adair?
Thanks, Chair. I'm actually wishing to move the recommendation as presented to us for refusal of the whole application.
Thank you, Commissioner Adair. Is there a seconder to that? Thank you, Commissioner Brooks. Do you wish to speak to it, Commissioner Adair?
Thank you. And I just want to premise what I'm going to say, that I have listened carefully today to everything and I've made a lot of notes. So this is not a predetermined position from me. There's been a lot of emphasis today placed on precinct planning and the lack thereof, and I acknowledge that the City of Joondalup have not been proactive or responsive in working with the applicant to progress precinct planning. However, the City has indicated that this should not progress without such planning. That said, in the absence of a structure plan, there's still a framework established through the City scheme, and obviously there is the application pathway that has been pursued through Part 17. And in the absence of detailed planning by local government, it is often left to the WAPC to determine the applicant appropriateness of these kind of applications. However, that said, in the absence of a structured plan, the onus is still on the applicant to demonstrate how their proposal will work, operate and fit into the location, meeting multiple criteria. In my mind, this has not been appropriately demonstrated. A partial approval keeps the balance of the application alive as it is currently presented. While I acknowledge that the request for deferral may result in some amendments, I have to consider this in its current form as presented to us. In that form, I cannot support this application. In my mind, it does not represent proper and orderly planning. If buildings A and B are the intended compromise development application, then that should be the application that is lodged and considered. And I believe that it's inconsistent and a little unfair on the State Development Assessment Unit for us to be asking them a lot of questions on isolated buildings when the application before us is for 7 buildings for the entire site. In the absence of precinct planning, buildings A and B may prejudice the planning for that complete area. So that would have to be given serious consideration. With all of that in mind, yes, I'm happy to move the recommendation as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner Adair. Commissioner Brooks, do you wish to make any comments?
Just briefly, mostly agree with Commissioner Adair. Just to add, I guess, a couple of points. The proposal as it's presented to us is heavily reliant on external infrastructure, particularly for drainage. So I don't see that we can consider individual buildings without taking that broader concept into consideration. The broader concept doesn't adequately, in my mind, address the requirements for the whole precinct in relation to public open space, in relation to infrastructure, drainage, water management, and would require more work to understand how it would sit within that development site. My concern, particularly with buildings A and B, would be that because of that heavy reliance on that external infrastructure, you'd be locking in that piece of infrastructure staying where it is and broadly in the form it is. It may be relocated underground, for example, but that would constrain other sites in its immediate vicinity and prevent them from having the same extent of basements, for example, that are proposed in the current buildings. Therefore, I don't think that buildings A and B can be approved without that broader consideration. And I don't believe that that broader consideration has been adequately demonstrated at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner Brooks. Members, any comments? Commissioner Hall?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd just really empathise with the applicant. I think that had the structure plan 2010 been accepted and progressed, I don't think we'd be here today, and there might be some homes on site that people could be living in. But having said that, the Part 17 pathway has enabled a thorough and transparent assessment process. There's been a lot of consultation across agencies, multiple local governments and the community. So I want to really acknowledge that the consultation period was even extended to ensure that the community had every opportunity to provide feedback, and the submissions received have informed consideration of the application, which as a commission we're required to have due regard. So in considering the application in accordance with the legislation, provisions of Part 17 of the Planning Development Act, the proposal, in my view, to satisfactorily address key amenity considerations, including local character, interface impacts, traffic and transport pressures, the adequacy and functionality of public open space, and the need to better integrate and coordinate planning across the precinct has not been demonstrated. So given these unresolved issues, this will guide my position in the decision we're about to make.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Are there any other comments? Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I speak in support of the motion proposed by Commissioner Adair. Whilst I'm supportive of delivery of density and housing and streamlining planning processes and avoiding structure planning where at all possible, I don't see that I can support the proposal in its current form. I do recognise that this is a secondary centre and density and height is really important in this location. However, for me, it's not about density at any cost. I have concerns that what could be developed in buildings A and B are not going to deliver an outcome that's well considered and an outcome that provides quality, affordable housing or an acceptable public realm outcome for the community. The lack of precinct structure planning and layout of the site is really unusual. It's really fragmented. We don't often see sites like this, and it emphasises the role of a precinct structure plan to consider the site as a collective. Typically in the past, through the Part 17 process, we have considered proposals in the absence of a structure plan, but that's where the development application typically encompasses the whole site, and all matters in relation to that site are considered as part of the development application. I'm not comfortable with the deferral of part of the site. I'm not confident or convinced that the concerns will be addressed during the during the deferral period, given the lack of work on the precinct structure planning to date and the lack of additional detail and information and engagement by the proponent through the process. I do recognise the concerns of the city with the proposal and their views around the preparation of a PSP and willingness to engage on this. I understand a number of years ago, it's been referenced the proponent did progress the structure plan, but since then there's generally been inaction. I'd really just strongly encourage the city to take action on this site as a valuable infill opportunity when it considers future structure planning in the new year. It is really important to consider these infill sites strategically, and this is a very ripe site as an opportunity for infill and density. I'm concerned that there's a number of key aspects for me that without a precinct structure plan aren't being resolved. That's that interface to the low-rise residential, particularly in terms of both a built form and a landscape outcome at that interface. The matters that Commissioner Brooks has spoken to around drainage management, as well as setbacks between buildings, the overarching traffic and transport network, and a precinct structure plan would also give the opportunity to consider community benefit opportunities as well. One of the arguments put forward by the proponent is around housing supply and affordability, which I'm absolutely sympathetic to and do recognise the need. I'm not confident, based on the information that's been provided, that affordable housing is a certain outcome for this proposal. I note that the proposal wasn't supported by the State Design Review Panel, and the applicants have not kind of demonstrated a willingness to make significant modifications to address that, albeit that they have accepted the conditions as proposed as an alternate option should we approve it. But the changes are so fundamental. There's 17 design modifications to meet those requirements, which are substantial in my mind. So on that basis, I'm not supportive of the application.
Thank you, Commissioner Bennett. Any further comments? Commissioner Lakey.
Thank you, Chair. This land is really unique and it's ripe for redevelopment. It's close to a train station, close to an amenity shopping centre, and it's an opportunity to provide much needed housing and diversity of density. It is, however, complex, and if there's ever a site, and I echo my colleagues, if there's ever a site that needed a precinct plan, this is it. And it is incredulous to me that the proponent actually did submit a structure plan in 2010, and here we are 15 years later, and it's come to the WAPC to make a decision. I find it surprising and very disappointing, the amount of public interest. You're all here. It's because we haven't got a precinct plan, and I think, and I implore the City of Joondalup to actually listen to the community and the proponent, to actually put in place a process for a PSP. Even today, in some of the conversations with the Mayor, there was still not a commitment, and that really concerns me. And that commitment might take 6 months before there's a decision made. I think the proponent has put a scheme forward. I think there are areas that need reworking. And I do believe that the item before us has been for a broader scheme. And I've found it very hard to rationalise myself into considering two smaller buildings or two buildings there, A and B, when the assessment, the advertising, the consideration has been for the full precinct. And I'm not convinced that everything has been considered. Having said that, it really pains me to not being able to approve more housing and density in our city. We're desperately needing it. But for all the reasons that my colleagues have said and I've said, I will be supporting the motion as put forward by my colleague Adair.
Thank you, Commissioner Lakey. Any further comments? Commissioner Sandry.
Thank you. Most comments have been stated, and I think the difficulty with this application is actually its uniqueness, and that's the lot layouts, the entry points, the easements, the ownership makeup, and also the complexity of the history of the site. I can see why the applicant pursued this pathway after many years of not having a precinct structure plan or a willingness to progress or facilitate one. I would strongly urge the city to consider this secondary centre as a priority for a PSP to enable a coordinated high density development outcome, particularly given the city is a landowner and particularly given that there is a motivated developer. And most landowners within this small precinct supported the proposal in some manner. But given the scale of this development with 7 buildings over a number of moderately connected lots, I feel that we have had to consider the application in a similar vein to a precinct structure plan, insofar as you have to iron out the more comprehensive modelling of traffic and other matters such as interface, drainage and design from a precinct level. It's very difficult when comparing an assessment against a single building on a single development application, which is why this is so complex. In my view, I don't believe that the application put to us satisfies the 4 limbs to the degree that they need to be satisfied. in order for us to approve it today, and certainly for me to be able to support an approval today, which is why I'll be supporting the motion on the table. I did consider strongly around buildings A and B being approved, but in my view, it is difficult because the application before us is for all 7, and the supporting documentation relates to all 7, and it hasn't been differentiated out, and we don't have modelling, etc., based on the 2 buildings alone. So, in the absence of that information, it is difficult. There's also a question as to whether approving A and B changes the development significantly or not, and that's still a question in my mind. So for that reason, the A and B was off the table for me through listening to the deputations today. I do sympathise with the developer, and similarly to Commissioner Lakey, it does pain me not to be able to support housing in this economic climate. And I certainly do think that this area, in terms of a secondary centre, should have density on it. But this application today just doesn't pass the threshold for me to be able to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think everyone's spoken except for me. I'll make a few comments, and I just wanted to say thank you all for the comments that you have provided today. I do support what has been said, and I'll try not to repeat, but I do think it's important for me to make some comments. I would just like to say that thank you, Commissioner Hall, for highlighting that there was an extended consultation period on this development application. I think that's really important, and it highlights that the Commission is responding to the community where there is really high public interest, and we're incredibly pleased to have a strong turnout here today. So thank you all for being here. I would like to acknowledge that there has been a referral process which has been outlined through the discussion today, and I'd particularly like to point out the feedback from Main Roads, Department of Transport and the Public Transport Authority, which all stated that they were unable to assess the application because they had all requested significant additional information to support the transport impact assessment in order to really understand the impacts of the development. They referred to things like the need for road network upgrades, understanding the road hierarchy in the precinct, pedestrian and traffic interaction, and there are other matters around car dominance due to the excess car parking and lack of active transport parking, although we did hear alternatively today from the applicant that that has been provided in the storeroom, so I do take that on board. The City of Joondalup today has strongly stressed the importance to them of having a precinct structure plan in place, and it is possible for the Commission to determine a DA without a structure plan, and that has been well discussed, so I won't go into that in any more detail today, but I think that it's fair to say that the Commission has not been satisfied that the applicant has satisfied those broader planning considerations that would be required at precinct level. The City of Joondalup today stressed that they are pro-growth and that they welcome development, that they're committed to working with the applicant, and this was incredibly pleasing to hear. They have said that they do want to proceed with precinct planning, and they want that integrated plan that the community is also asking for. So I do ask the City of Joondalup to be really mindful of the fact that we have a developer here who is willing to develop, and that precinct plan does need to be prioritised. Today, whilst we've had lots of discussion about determining building A and B only, the fact is that the applicant has not amended their DA to reduce the scope of the application. They have asked us to determine those 2 buildings today and to defer determinations of buildings C to G. So the whole application does remain for the Commission's determination. Consideration of the housing crisis is something that is of high importance, and we fully understand the issues outlined by the applicant today in terms of pointing out the extremity of the housing crisis that we do face. That is understood and it's respected. The WAPC is actively supporting land and housing supply as evidenced through various decisions under Part 17, Part 11B and in our land use planning decision making. Density in this location is appropriate. This is a secondary centre. Infill housing is absolutely needed. Affordable housing is needed. But unfortunately, it's a lack of consideration of those broader precinct matters, the transition and integration into surrounding residential area, the veracity of the transport impact assessment and the R-code assessment and the design response that shows that this is problematic development as proposed. The R code assessment was undertaken on all seven buildings, and the SDAU has gone to some lengths to try to highlight the particular issues with buildings A and B, which they have outlined on pages 34 and 35 of the report. And the SDRP has recommended full reconsideration to establish an attractive and well-functioning centre that's well integrated into the surrounding residential area. The report of the first design review was provided to the applicant, and the applicant had further opportunities to continue with design review. Ordinarily, for significant development, an applicant would have at least 3 design review panel meetings and go through go through a process with the SDRP in responding to the advice received. Deferral considerations are important, and I think that we do need to highlight that whilst that request has been put to us, the process, timeframe and consistent advice provided by SDAU throughout the 2 years of this process and before during pre-lodgement has been consistent. The purpose of Part 17 is to facilitate development in response to the economic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And while that may seem in the distant past, one of the reasons why we're having a housing crisis today is still linked to the COVID-19 pandemic, and that does remain relevant today in terms of supply chain issues, construction feasibility, and workforce issues. The applicant has requested more time for building C to G so that it can engage with stakeholders and has listed those stakeholders. But I would say that there has been clear, consistent requests and advice made by the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage and by the referral agencies. As Paola de Perna highlighted, 4 pieces of planning advice, and the information received in response to requests for information has been relatively minimal, and that fundamental aspects have remained unresolved. The Part 17 pathway is an important pathway. It still exists, although applications cannot be made afresh. We currently have now around 9 applications remaining to be determined. This site is vacant, underutilised land. It's ripe for redevelopment and infill, and I strongly encourage the City of Joondalup to continue to start again working with the applicant on precinct planning for the secondary centre. Again, on the deferral, I just want to note that it is up to the Commission to determine the entire building today, and that given that we do need to make decisions in this Part 17 pathway as soon as practicable, I don't see that there's any grounds for continuing to consider this application further, given the 2 years that this has been under assessment and given the history outlined in the report received by the Commission. I strongly encourage the applicant to continue to work on this site. We do want to see housing in this location and development, and I would just reiterate those messages to the City of Joondalup and applicant to please do strive to deliver some housing in this location, and we're certainly prepared to see another iteration come forward. Thank you. I think that is all members that have spoken. So we have all spoken in favour, so I am taking that as no dissent, and the motion has carried. I just do need to note some State Administrative Tribunal applications. We still have in the State Administrative Tribunal the Flat Rocks Wind Farm for Renewable Energy Facility and the Part 17 development application for the Vanadium Processing Facility. Members, is there any urgent or other business that you wish to raise? Thank you very much. In concluding the meeting, I'd like to thank all members for your attendance today. My apologies for the rocky start with our technical difficulties, and I really appreciate the way in which you've been so respectful as we've conducted our business today. I'd also like to thank the City of Joondalup for facilitating today's meeting. Thank you very much. The meeting is closed.